Everything we know, from people and ants to stars and galaxies to quarks and atoms, the entire universe, might just be a simulation running inside a supercomputer inside an even bigger universe. Ancient philosophers said that the universe is a dream that we're waiting to wake up from. In this dream world of the imagination, anything is possible. All cultural items, from the dreams of our rodent-like ancestors, to books, to television shows, are merely permutations of the reality we think we live in. Today's age of computers and video games places simulations at the center of our cultural consciousness. A select group of us perform simulations for fun and profit, and we call them games, role-playing and otherwise. We live to run simulations. Join us on the Simulationist podcast as we explore our culture of simulation.
Hello, once again, welcome to the Simulationist podcast. My name is Josh Trelevin. With me, as always,
co-host extraordinaire, Ryan Kirkby.
Hey. So, this is the 82nd of these iterations.
The 30th of March.
Today is the 30th of March.
2014.
Hello, all of you people out there in podcast listening world land. That was awkward. And
I think it's supposed to be if it's the blogosphere, then do we have like the podcastoscope or something?
Oh wow! I don't think I've ever heard of anybody say what the podcastoscope is.
Well, I mean, if the blog is a sphere, the podcastahedron, because I can dig that.
Well, I mean, I like it. Logically, it would be as close as possible to a sphere, so logically, I would say it's just another kind of sphere, so a podcastosphere. But I guess
that's already been taken. The podcastahedron. That sounds like techno batters.
Yeah, I guess if we're the ones who get to invent the term, I guess that's up to us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And you could say it comes off like the the dodecahedron, in which case it's something kind of spherical, but a little rough around the edges.
Okay, so are we settled on that then?
I believe we are.
It is the
podcastahedron. So there we go.
There.
It started here. You guys caught the meme first. You're welcome.
Now, we obviously came up with it, so we could say that's copyright, but we should gift it to the rest of the podcasting.
Well, we gift a lot of our ideas off here, so I think that should probably be the one we definitely want to gift off first and foremost.
The name for all podcasts everywhere for all time.
It unifies us as a whole.
Good thing we thought of that. Wow.
Yeah.
We almost had a crisis averted there.
Yeah.
Almost didn't know what to call the podcastahedron.
And now you do. Now you do. We got a nice little topic, though, this week about believable magic and how you can use technology to effectively replace it.
Yes,
but
technology.
First, what have we been doing this week?
Okay, so we're gonna get to that main topic later. So I guess now
the preliminaries.
Do you want to start with my activities?
What have you been doing this week?
My simulations that I've been running, as I always do. Well, sometimes you go first, but anyways.
No, you go first this week. I helped come up with the podcastahedron. Let's see what you've been doing this week.
Well, yes, a couple of things. Let's do the top three, I guess. I wrote into somebody else's podcast, the NPC cast, and they did a whole show on like a question I asked. So I sort of wanted to, I don't know, I guess
a shout out, thanks.
Geek out about getting sort of mentioned on another podcast. Not
your ideas spawn podcast.
Yeah. So that was really cool. And they so what I'll do is I'll recommend that anybody listening to this one, if you enjoy what you hear, like us talking about every week, you probably will also enjoy the NPC cast. Basically, NPC, that's the letters, NPC cast. Just type those into iTunes or your favorite podcaster catcher.
Your search engine of choice.
Yeah, and you'll find them, and you'll find an episode with a question that I sort of formulated, and they're pretty smart guys themselves, so they obviously took it off and
ran with it.
Yeah.
Made it their own.
So that's one thing that was pretty cool that happened this week.
I guess that is pretty cool.
As far as my involvement was asking a simple question, which I'll let you find. I mean, I can't even remember how I worded it, so I'll let you find it in their podcast feed. But yeah, my small involvement there. The other thing, what else I've been doing? I finally got around to watching. Well, finally got around. They released The Hobbit the second movie.
The Desolation of Smaug?
The Desolation of Smaug. They released it on iTunes, so I picked
you got
it
a
up
chance
there.
to watch it. What did you think, Josh?
I loved it. I mean, I really wish I had the third movie, so I guess that's sort of a good sign, I guess.
As soon as it ended, I was like, oh, I want more. Can I go back home and just like watch it, all the stuff up to that, and can I get that same high of watching it again?
Yeah, and I think Peter Jackson is really good. I'm not sure about his storytelling, like as far as being like stringing everything together. I'm not sure about that aspect of it. But what he knows is film, and he knows spectacle, and he knows big. So that movie it moves from thing to thing, and you're always watching something really cool and exciting. So that's what I liked about it. And I watched, of course, I couldn't just watch that movie, so I watched the other one too.
The first part.
An Unexpected Journey.
Yes.
Not Party, because that was
no.
chapter or whatever. Yeah.
Yes.
So I watched that and a bunch of extra features, so that basically ate up
hours upon hours of
yes,
your
a lot
time.
of my week, a lot of my free time over the week.
But time well spent, I think. So here's the big question.
Yeah.
He clearly went through a lot more of what was going on inside there with Smaug and Bilbo than was originally covered in the Hobbit book. Do you think that was bad? Like a bad thing that he took and did. Okay, and then they go do this, and they're doing this, and then they sliding around on here, and the whole thing is okay. Minor spoiler, don't worry, but minor spoiler. There's so much gold that Smaug is sleeping on. It's basically like a ski hill of gold coins and treasures.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that did go through my head that that's unrealistic or that's insane. But then after that, it's like, well, I guess that's what he's doing, so just, go with it. So, yeah, that's, it didn't bother me after, well, in a little way it bothers me.
It's something you were able to recognize while you were watching it.
Yeah, so I guess it does take you out. But the whole movie, there are always things that take me out. Like I think this is part of the style. And I don't know if this would apply to, kids watching or something, because kids might completely be enthralled. But everywhere in that movie, there's always something sort of taking me out. And I don't know what that is. Like, there's always something like the trolls are acting kind of weird. Like, I'm thinking about, how, especially, you watch the special features and you get to see how they actually did it, which is, makes it way better. So,
well, at least you have a lot more respect for it when you're thinking back on the whole thing. It's like, wow, and it took so long to get them to do that just right, and they had to try so many angles and perspectives and concepts. Yeah. Well,
and I find this with watching a lot of sort of fantasy or maybe sci-fi movies is that you look for the special effects, and it's sort of in some ways it takes away from the magic, but then when you do watch the making ofs, you see the same special effects in a whole different light.
Oh, that's why if there's one movie I got to recommend to everybody, it's The Wizard of Speed and Time, which is a movie about how a guy makes a short full of special effects and the processes they used to go through the whole thing. It's a little old. It's by Disney, but I don't think Disney likes it because the last time they released it was on Laserdisc. So you might have to find it somehow, some way on the internet.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone's going to prosecute. It's like one of them lost children sort of thing. But the learning of how the special effects goes through, it changes. I mean, if you watch enough of it, it can really change how you view anything. Because of that sort of movie and the basic realization, no matter how real it looks, how scary it might be, it's all a trick of the camera, a trick of the light, a trick of this and that. It's not real.
Yeah.
I was able to watch all sorts of horror movies younger than I should have been, but be able to take myself out of the situation like, it's an alien that burst out of someone's chest. No. What happened was it was probably the guy, fake chest, he's sitting underneath the table, and then somebody just pops it up there. It didn't really go through his chest. And so even though it was a really scary scene in the original Alien movie, I wasn't that scared because I'd seen enough of how the special effects are made even back then.
Yeah. So. And another thing, like the little trick that I guess they make a big deal out of it, is out of making the characters appear to be the size that they're supposed to be.
Oh, yes.
Like, Gandalf is supposed to be a lot taller than the dwarves.
He's like 6 feet tall. Dwarves are like 4 feet, maybe 5.
Yeah, exactly. And when you when I watch the film, I find it very hard. Like, I don't even notice. Like, it doesn't. Most of the time, they
most
do.
Most of the time, they're all by themselves.
Well, they're either by themselves or they're sort of the way they're interacting. Like, one of them might be sitting, so it's hard to actually like get a feeling of, oh, this character is way bigger than this other character. Except every once in a while, you get like moment.
Bjorn coming in. It's like, holy criminy, that guy is a mountain with legs.
Yeah, Bjorn came in, and he.
I liked him. He had a weird style to him, but I liked him.
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, like, anytime I see well, I don't know about anytime because I don't see that many films that I've read the book of, except for The Hobbit and a few others. But I always enjoy seeing what the sort of costume directors come up with. How close
was my image to what the now official image is for him?
Yeah, and it's funny. Another thing about reading the book too is if you watch a film first and then read a book, you sort of that becomes the image that you have in your head when you read the book. But if you do the other way around, you will often have a different picture in your brain.
And that's why I've avoided reading the Harry Potter series until after I finish watching all the movies.
Yeah, you want to know what all the characters look like.
Well, there's that. There's also the little bit about a lot of people saying they only covered a little bit of what was in the book. It was a decent movie, but it really wasn't enough compared to the people who never saw, or never read the books. So they watch the movie and they go, yeah, I like that movie. That was a pretty good movie. I really liked it. So it seems like you get more enjoyment out of, watching a movie without having read the book and then reading the book later to get all these extra bonus content.
That's true. Sort of like watching the DVD extras a little bit.
That's, I think, possibly a very good way to get people into reading books they otherwise, wouldn't be the kind of people to read. It's like, oh yeah, it's a little literary, but it has all this extra bonus content. It's called the full canon. So, maybe that would be an interesting way to get more people reading. Who knows?
Yep.
So you liked it? Definitely 2 thumbs up.
Yep. 13 dwarves out of 13.
Very nice.
Full 13. Well, should I give it all 13? Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I would.
I think that's what I mean. Just the scene for them in the barrels in the river was a magnificent scene. Like, that's something I'm going to have to watch a few times, once I buy it, and then rewind and watch it again just to watch this goes here and this goes here and these guys are on that way, and see how well they've coordinated every little thing. Because it really did look like a scene where they had to sit down and really do a lot of planning for each stage before they even began concept of, like, film from this angle and that angle and the other.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we need to go into the whole, like, they should have died, because that's a very dangerous, that whole barrel sequence. I cannot suspend my disbelief on most of that, like the elves jumping on top of the dwarves and them going over waterfalls and not dying.
Well, it wasn't huge waterfalls, they're just small waterfalls. I mean, people have survived going over, like Niagara Falls in barrels, so I figure a couple dwarves can go over a smaller waterfall and be all right.
Although one thing I did figure out, which sort of I wish I figured out earlier, but the barrels don't actually have to be like upright in order to float. Like because I noticed one of the barrels was actually full of water as it was floating there. Yeah. So the wood is buoyant enough. So you don't. So at first I was like, how do they even? But then you realize no, the barrels are the only reason they can sit that low in the water to begin with is because
heavy dwarves.
Well, there's a heavy dwarf, and they will be
water
full of water too.
In.
Yeah.
Well, it's either that or put a lid on there, and then the dwarf is effectively entombed. It's no longer a barrel; it's a just very round casket.
I thought that was how it happened in the book, but
that got kind of boring, and I kind of dug what they did there. So it's not what was happening in the pages, but it was pretty darn good, so I'll forgive it.
And that's what what I was trying to say too about Peter Jackson being very good at film and doing visual things like.
Well, that's the thing is writing about like then the dwarves like managed to sneak out like in barrels all hidden and no one suspected a thing. That's not bad. Yeah. But does it make for a good like screenplay right up? Does it make for good movie content? The answer is no. Have them whipping axes around with goblins chasing them and then elves chasing them all together.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes for a much better scene. Like it's kind of hard to argue that. But here's the one last question I have for you.
All right.
Okay. I don't think this qualifies as a spoiler, but the leader of the human town is played by Stephen Fry.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, Stephen Fry is a pretty well-known actor. Okay, he's not on the lines, of Sir Ian McKellen playing Gandalf and all that. Mm-hmm. But he's a big name actor, and whenever he appears in like a scene and all that, a lot of people don't see the character; they see Stephen Fry.
Yeah.
Did that happen with you? Were you able to say, "Oh, hey, I know him," and then just, okay, yeah, he's playing this character, or was it always the actor there? Just like, oh, and all of a sudden the actor appears here and he's pretending to be this person.
For me, like, the only thing that was in my head is, oh, that's Stephen Fry. I'm so excited. I mean, I'm sure his performance was good. Great. I mean, he's a good actor and everything like that.
He's a great actor playing a not a great so character. So
yeah. Honestly, though, yeah, every scene I was watching, I was just like thinking about, oh, that's Stephen Fry. Oh, that's Stephen Fry. So yeah. So
maybe he needed more facial hair to disguise who he was.
Well, I would still notice that. And the thing is, like, that character didn't have that many lines anyways. Like, I mean, I think he has a bigger part in the book, too. But
maybe in the third part, he'll be bigger.
Yeah.
Have more stuff going on.
But he has an assistant, and I'm not familiar with the guy who played the assistant.
We'll call him New Wormtongue.
Yeah, New Wormtongue.
Because that's kind of what he is.
Yeah, and he's definitely more agentific, more of an agent,
more of a free agent sort of thing, just working for
like just more of a character. Yeah. He does more things. Like, I guess the idea with well, is this too many spoilers? Anyway, the master of Lake Town, he's kind of a drunk, and he's kind of always kind of out of it.
It doesn't really want to be there, so the sweet release of alcohol.
Yeah.
Apparently, the whole place kind of smells like fish too. You got to get something in your system to get rid of that smell sometimes, and it's got to be something strong like booze.
Well, I would think that people in that town probably would get used to the smell, but
you know what? You'd think that, but I spent a lot of time in fish classes back in university, and there was a few times I spent like 3 or 4 hours getting the otoliths out of the fish's nose area. There's some interesting things you can tell about that. Look it up yourselves. Don't if you're big on that. But long story short, it had to take me to get to some alcohol to get that smell out of my nose.
Oh,
that was several hours, after full removed from any fish, washing my hands, make sure there's nothing on there. That smell stuck in my nose until I got a little bit of alcohol in my system. That was the only way to clear it out. I'm not big on drinking heavily, but I needed some to get rid of it. Okay. So I will vouch, at least the whole bit about, the master of Lake Town being a bit of a drunk, at least there's a plausible line of reasoning there for those who have worked with a lot of fish before.
Okay, fair enough. And one other character that I sort of have a same feeling for is Stephen Colbert plays a character in one of the scenes in Lake Town too. He's one of the spies, one of the master's spies. So he's like passing on a message. There's a bunch of them. They're all
but here's the thing: is I didn't realize it was Stephen Colbert until after, because with Stephen Colbert, you expect the character Stephen Colbert, the guy who looks suspiciously like Superman, with the haircut and all the glasses, reporter style going on, and the fact that he's those who know Stephen Colbert the person will know that he is hugely into that sort of thing. He can tell the whole mythology of what's behind this and that rock over there is this rock, and it's this, and so-and-so's head cracked on it 4,000 years ago.
Not a rock, but anyways.
So he knows all that little stuff, and so him going in there was probably just a nice little like, hey, we hear you love it. Would you like a quick scene? We can slip you in.
Yeah, that's what they did. Like from what I hear on the YouTube videos I've watched is or the YouTube video or the diaries, I think it was. Peter Jackson at one point invited Stephen Colbert to go to New Zealand and tour all the sets, and at one point he's like, well, we need I don't know if they needed a character or they just...
We could always use an extra person whispering from A to B to C to D along this chain. We want to get in costume.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it occurs to me that there probably were a few more instances of that sort of thing happening with big fans getting a chance to sort of,
well, that's the thing is,
an extra.
I'm willing to bet as soon as they announce that, they're going to start filming for The Hobbit, a lot of nerds temporarily move to New Zealand to try and get themselves a bit character role anywhere in the background.
Yeah.
Like, had I the money and the inclination, I would have tried to do so myself. but I honestly don't believe myself to be that good of an actor, and there was going to be a lot of extras there, so the chances of getting in were slim. I stayed here in Canada. I don't regret it very much.
So
just a little.
The parallel point I wanted to make about Stephen Colbert is that as soon as I saw him on screen, it wasn't like, oh, that's a spy of, so and so, or he's a bad guy, or
one
whatever.
of the Master's many spies.
Yeah, one of the Master's spies. I just thought to myself, oh, Stephen Colbert. So it's, that's what you get when you.
When you're that big a name, when that big a face.
Same thing when Legolas appears. It's like, oh, there's Legolas. Whoever, Orlando Bloom, there he is.
Well, that's the thing, is Orlando Bloom didn't get big until after the
that's
movie.
True. Yeah.
That's how he got. That's what got a lot of ladies in on those movies. Oh, that pretty elf boy.
Yeah.
Well, what's his name? Orlando Bloom. But everyone remembered him originally as Legolas. So that was much more forgivable. It was nice to see the character return. The actor, like you recognize him elsewhere. It's like, oh, the Pirates of the Caribbean. It's got Legolas in it. What's his name? No, it's the actor Orlando Bloom. Legolas is not in it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that had to get corrected when the first of those movies came out.
Yeah.
So he's a bit of an inversion in that principle.
Okay.
Because in other movies you'll see, oh, it's Legolas. No, it's not Legolas.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's not Stephen Fry. It's the Master. Yeah. But it's just something that I had to consciously think. Okay, focus. Not Stephen Fry. It's the Master of Lake Town. And then once I was able to get in that, and he showed himself as like a drunken sot, kind of dim bulb, really helped take that out because Stephen Fry is known for his intelligence. So him playing a dim bulb really helps separate character from actor for me. Yeah,
well, and on this topic too, there was also like I don't know, if a little piece in some gossip thing about the new Star Wars, and how J.J. Abrams he said something like he doesn't want to have familiar faces in the Star Wars Episode 7 that he's working on.
Well, he's lucky in that he can have familiar races. You want yourself one of those. Those like slave girls that Jabba had with the long, was it Twi'lek, head tail Twi'lek thing that they had. Yeah, you can do that. You don't need the character. You just need the race.
Well, most of the main characters in Star Wars are human. There's a Wookiee. There's some droids. Droids are always going to look different. I have
recently heard that R2-D2 may be making an appearance.
I think I think R2-D2 and C-3PO kind of have to. They're sort of the thread that.
But I think it's along the lines of like the prequel trilogy, where you have the appearance of Jabba the Hutt. Okay. It doesn't necessarily need to be Jabba. Most people didn't even recognize it. You wouldn't be able to recognize one Hutt from another. It could have been any Hutt. All you need is that familiar slug-like shape.
Yeah.
And you don't need anything else.
Okay.
Technically, you don't even need Boba Fett. You can just have some guy in Mandalorian armor, and good enough.
Yeah, that's true.
So he lucked out in that one, for that sort of regard. I will say this though, if he winds up like causing a break in the fandom for the next 3 movies, he will be known as Jar Jar Abrams.
I didn't think of that, but yes, that's true.
So I'm saying Star Trek was one thing. You can go various places. But if he's got the lens flares indoors, and he's doing this thing, and he winds up not quite getting it, not doing the proper, side swipes or star swirls to change the scene, the little things that really emphasize this is this universe, and just makes it like, oh, it's just kind of any generic sort of space adventure thing, he will get called Jar Jar Abrams for the rest of his career.
You think that's what makes it, breaks it, the swipes?
Well, the swipes are the most ready example.
Okay.
The state of technology, that's just been like apostate for like a millennia, is another one. So oh yes, you're in the future, but they still have a bad horizontal hold on your 3D imager.
Yeah. Although, well, depending on how long this picture, this film occurs after the rebellion and all that, and the death of the Empire, they might have some better technology. Because
well, that's the thing is even when things were going great, when they were the Senate beforehand, there really wasn't any technological progress. They, for some reason, had no. It wouldn't be a societal; it'd be like a mega societal lack of desire to improve their technology.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that before,
Yeah.
the stagnation on a galactic level.
I mean, they'd come up with different looking droids, and they'd have different roles, but there really wouldn't be any new innovations. It wouldn't be... I suppose you could qualify their droids, as like their version of like the iPad, the iPod stuff from Apple. It's just like, it's not really all that new. It's just, a new number on it, and it looks a little different. If you're the kind of guy to hate on Apple, you can make a nice comparison with the Star, droids there.
All right, yeah.
So, if he winds up doing, like, new technology and, like, all of a sudden they've got, like, super, like automated this and that, and, like, humanity's, or all the other alien lives are leading a life of luxury on the backs of the machines, it's probably not going to wind up feeling the same, and that's going to cause a lot of problems. It has to have the right, we'll say, mental texture for it to work.
Okay, yeah, the right aesthetic.
Well, that's the thing. It's in the future. You're in, like a multi, like planetary, like a nearly galactic civilization. There's that one chunk that you can't get to because of a lack of, trade routes and all that, and problems, interstellar space and all that.
Yeah.
But it still feels kind of grimy. There's still, like oil just in the corners of here and there. It isn't polished. Star Trek was always very polished. You never walk down like a Federation starship and see grit or anything down here. You didn't even see anyone vacuuming the floors. You never saw anything polishing. It just seemed automatically that neat. Whereas in Star Wars, maybe it's clean. Yeah, that Death Star looked pretty clean, but they had little droids cleaning stuff up and mopping the floor sort of thing going on there. Yeah. You had to work at it to be clean, otherwise it just becomes like a dirty, like gritty sort of, like calamari sort of squishy, gooey thing.
Well, like Anakin had a line in one of the movies about how sand gets everywhere in Tatooine.
Well, there you go. That's the thing is the grit gets everywhere no matter where you are. Yeah. It might not always be sand, but that's how you know it's Star Wars.
Yeah, okay.
It's dirtier. It's not so polished. It lacks the veneer.
Yeah.
And so if you wind up watching Episode 7 and everything like, oh, that spaceship looks really shiny. Nope.
Yeah. Well, they did shiny spaceships in Episode 1 with the Phantom Menace. They did, the
Naboo. Imperial ones, yes,
yeah.
The ones done for princesses
the
and all that sort of thing. But by and large, most of the ships were, it's like, you could probably use a good coat of paint. It's like the technology we have for making cars look shiny now technically outstrips a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's sort of aesthetic texture to it. That if he doesn't get that right, he's going to have a lot of angry nerds on his case.
Well,
rightfully,
maybe,
not rightfully. Well, that's not up for me to decide. I'm just going to say this is how it's going to play out.
People want to see a gritty Star Wars. Yeah, I can.
Otherwise, for them, it won't feel like Star Wars.
I mean. And the thing is, we've seen a lot of stories told in novel form and in comic book form about what happens after the whole...
And you know what? I'm okay with them getting rid of that extended canon and say, okay, we got to start fresh on here. There's a lot of stuff going on. We might bring in a character or two, but we're just going to have to start fresh.
Yeah, and so that, that invites the question of, what sort of conflict can arise that's... how can you rival something like the Emperor of the Galaxy getting overthrown sort of deal? Or, the Emperor taking over, and then that whole arc is from Episode 1 to 6, the Emperor, the rise of the Emperor, and then his eventual death, and then Darth Vader, his lieutenant, dies. So there's what else is there to do? I guess it has to be a new threat, a new arc, basically.
Well, that's the thing is they had the whole bit about people from outside the galaxy coming in and invading. And that was an interesting one, but they're not going with that. That's no longer canon, apparently.
Yeah.
Just remember this, is it takes more than two men to rule the galactic, empire that they had. There had to be a lot of people complicit with what they were doing. And just because you killed the two head leaders doesn't mean you're not going to have a lot of these corrupt officials that wanted to go, on the gravy train and see what they could get away with for their small power empire.
Well, so it's Star Wars Episode 7, the epic mop-up operation.
Well, that's the thing is it's not a simple fact of we killed Hitler, now Germany is good again, sort of thing that everyone likes to believe ended World War II. Well, there was a lot of problems as to who was dealing with what.
I know there was problems, but is that the epic story?
But
is that the tale of the hero, the rise and fall of the hero? You can squeeze 3 more episodes out of reforming Germany?
But here's the thing: what happened after the fall of Germany in World War II? the Cold War started. So you can wind up having like a lot of people that kind of liked what they were going with what was happening with the Empire because they were not doing too badly, and they could wind up having like a shadow equivalency to the government that way. So you could wind up having like a whole like two different who rules and versus who's supposed to rule and which one takes precedence. This world is really good, and so yeah, they might have a few miscreants who liked it, but then you go over near Hutt space. And it's really, like the proper elected officials are basically just puppets.
Well, yeah.
So you could wind up telling a good story if you're a good enough writer for that. I'm going to cross my fingers for them because I think there's some good potential. Maybe they come up with a new threat. Maybe some really old threat that's always just been lingering in the background.
Yeah. Well, I think my favorite series of novels that in the extended universe. Because I used to own a whole bunch of them, and I had read many of them. I stopped reading them after a while, so I don't know how many have come out. But there was a trilogy that Timothy Zahn had written. I don't know, Timothy Zahn maybe.
It was called Zahn. Zahn sounds classier for some reason.
And his first book in that trilogy was, I think it was called Heir to the Empire. So it's like a new Sith Lord arises, and it was a good novel. It was really well written, and it was very suspenseful, and this is a galactic threat. But basically, it's a new Sith Lord has risen in this other sector of the galaxy, and he's bringing the Empire back together. Getting the band back together. So now we have to go fight him. So
here's an idea to run by you. Okay, so on that alien, cloning planet that they had that cloned all the soldiers, right? All the stormtroopers.
Yeah.
Another planet, same sort of thing, but instead of cloning stormtroopers, they're cloning Palpatines. You want one Sith Lord? No. We have got enough Sith Lords to rival, your entire army. Bam, fight them. Bam, they're coming back. As to how they've decided who's ruling what, because apparently, Palpatine kind of had a power thing going. I don't know about that. I'm just throwing an idea out there. There you go. Just an entire army of Sith shooting lightning out every which way, and red lightsabers swishing around.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, don't tell me you don't want to see that one on the big screen.
I do.
Sith army, man.
I don't know if J.J. Abrams can pull that off.
Oh, sure, it'll just be that the lightsabers emit lens flares, and that's all I care to see after that.
Is he the lens flare guy?
He is the lens flare guy.
The Star Trek.
And I don't mind it when it's outdoors sort of thing. When it's an outdoor sort of thing, it really does have a natural look. It's when it happens indoors that sort of gets my eye.
Okay.
So, turn down that lighting.
Yeah, I've never noticed that.
Once you start noticing it, you start noticing it every time it happens.
Oh, great. Well, yeah. No.
It was going to happen eventually. It's like, why was there a lens flare indoors? And then, bam, it hits you, and every time you see it, it just breaks you out of everything else.
Okay. Well, we might get to No, are we going to get to... Oh, anyways. I also had one other thought that I wanted to bring up about characters. You asked the question about recognizing, Stephen Fry and being able to distinguish him and his character. And one of the things I found out in the course of watching the DVD extras is that the dwarves, I think they had 3, maybe more actors playing each dwarf because they have the face, the main the head.
Then you got the body
title.
Shot guys. As with the Hobbits in the first 3 movies with the Lord of the Rings, it wasn't always the real people. Sometimes they had shorter statured people, like when they were in with the prancing pony.
Yeah, so you have their size doubles.
Yeah.
And you have their stunt doubles. And I think there might have been also stunt size doubles.
Depending on whether or not you've got human size sort of thing as to, who's doing what with, next to whom.
So, the reason I like that is because when you watch a whole movie with this character, and I didn't know the dwarves from before, any of the actors of the dwarves from before.
Some of them are like with Orlando Bloom, this is their first big breakout sort of thing.
Yeah, true. So
they're not as sexy as an elf, but whatever.
So a couple of things they have going for them is that, one, they're in heavy makeup, so even if you did know who they were, you might not recognize them necessarily.
What if I put a beard on you? Oh my God, you're one of the 13.
Yeah, so they have that, and then so when you see the whole, the film put together, and obviously that actor is contributing something major to the character, like in the form of acting, but also like that character isn't just the one guy. Like that character is a composite of 3 actors plus countless makeup people and
some CGI everywhere here and there once in a while, as demanded.
So, it's hard to see a character as just the actor. Like take Thorin for example. That's what, Richard Armitage or whatever.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's his name. It's hard to see Thorin as just like, oh my God, that's Richard Armitage. Even though I don't really care about him that much, but I loved him in the movie.
Yeah. It'll help make you want.
I will. Yeah, I'll watch more movies with him in them. But yeah, when I see him on screen, I don't go, "Squee, that's the guy," because I go, "Squee, there's so many, like, he's almost like a puppet. He's almost like this is, they're operating a..."
He is one facet amongst many that makes the composite of Thorin Oakenshield.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He's just, one edge on the diamond that is the character.
And it always seems a little bit weird to me to that the fact that those guys are the ones who get to go on panels at Comic-Con and conventions.
Well, so that's the thing, is they go on panels at Comic-Con, but then you do have some of the more technical areas, that have their own groups together. Like I believe there's even like an award show just for the people who will do like a lot of the background and the stunt stuff. It doesn't get the press of the Emmys or the Grammys or anything like that, but in their own field, those people do get the notoriety, and they do get the respect of their peers that way. So it's not as though like it's like, oh yeah, I was Thorin Oakenshield for like a third of the movie, but he's the one on the panels. At least the other people in the field will know you were him, and that happened, and you get the respect, and they get people asking you, could you help out with this, or could you
and you give some advice,
build
on
your
this panel sort of resume and
Could you come in here and there's a lot of people that are starting out in this sort of role sort of thing, same as you. Could you give some words of advice, and we'll pay you a little bit for your time. So it's not quite the same as going to Comic-Con and having a panel that way, but at least it's still something. It's not like you get like a raw deal off of it.
Yeah.
Unless you don't try and work the whole thing, in which case you're giving yourself the raw deal. But that's a topic for another time.
Okay. So, I think that's what I've... Oh, and the other thing I've been doing is I've been working on my hexagon game. I've been writing up lists and lists of locations to turn into hexagons for that game. So that's how that's going. I've decided on sort of an art style, but I'm going to do the first several arts on my own. But after that, like, there's no way one person can draw all the.
Well, no, it's like Magic the Gathering.
Yeah,
it's like if they relied on just one artist, maybe they'd be getting around to 4th edition now.
Yeah,
it's a lot of art.
So I'm gonna. And this is one thing. I guess I can ask if people know artists out there, and I'm going to be looking at DeviantArt and seeing who does what.
You might want send off a message, ask if I can use it, for like a clip of your landscape art for the game I'm trying to work on.
Well, I mean, I might use clips, like I might use what they have as sort of examples, but the idea is ultimately I want to make this a complete, like a new game, its own thing. So actually commission art. So this is uncharted territory for me because I've never kind of directed an artistic team before, so I don't. We'll see what happens.
First time for everything, chance to learn. Right?
So there's no money right now, but once I get a Kickstarter going and things like that, I mean, there may be opportunities for artists to join me. There will be opportunities for artists to join. And do cool things with that. So
very nice.
That's going to happen.
Hooray! All right.
So that's what I've been up to, watching movies, doing stuff. What if we haven't got to you yet?
Well, see, I'm still doing the double roll on the Marvel Avengers Alliance right now, because as I discussed last week, is they had effectively 2 versions of the game. One was on the Facebook site, and one was on the Playdom main site. But the Playdom one is not making enough money, or for some reason it was too hard to keep 2 copies of the game going, and so they decided to shut that down. Come the 20th of April, everything everyone's ever done on there just completely boils away to nothing. And so I had a spare account from I can't get into my main account, I got to try and sign up and see what I can do here. Oh wait, I just entered my password in wrong. Forget this one. So I had a backup account, and I'm thinking, well, you know what? I can understand what it's like when a game sunsets and all of a sudden it's like everything you work towards just is like means nothing anymore. So I've been trying to work both games, both my main one with all the stuff that's going on, and as well as trying to help out on the spare one. Get some people, that says, hey, I'm just new to the game on this one. I need some more friends and allies, and so I'm trying to work with that and try and help everyone out.
Oh, yeah.
And that's eating a decent amount of my time. It's not hard, effectively leading a double life, doing the same thing twice every dang day.
Playing the same game twice every day.
Well, so that's the other thing is, on my spare account, I am about 250 levels behind. So I can place through the same sort of areas, but everyone's at a much lower level. And so I'm testing myself. How good are the tactics do I really have, or am I just relying on high-end characters with a lot of sweet weapons of my own guy? And so I'm testing myself out that way. I miss my really sweet weapons when I'm playing on the lower level one, I gotta say. It's like, oh no, all I've got is like a small dagger and a handgun. As opposed to, like my sweet weapon, which drains everyone of life, and then all of a sudden, now you've all got disease and plague, and I've got the epic weapons. It's like, no, I've got like the dagger can poison you if I hit, and the gun can really hurt because it's a gun. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's not much. Like where do I find these sweet weapons? So I'm going back and I'm looking for the little things I just skipped before because it's like, dude, I got better than that. I don't need to care about this at all. So I'm having a little bit of fun with that.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know how much longer I can keep it up, though. It is really eaten through my hours. Like, I didn't get much of a chance to play XCOM at all this week. Although I am devoting time to just playing around with the whole concept of it as a tabletop sort of thing, like as I've been doing the last couple of weeks. Put my money where my mouth is, as I've been calling it.
Yeah, turning it into like almost its own role-playing setting.
Yeah, well, I'm using the tri-stat system, so everything works out kind of easy for me. It's like, okay, I want to create a set of armor for them to use. And so it's like, okay, this does that, and I've got so many extra points to spend. Oh, hey, I can make them glide. So it's like, oh, you have the option of, instead of just having a nice suit, like a bodysuit to wear, it's like, okay, now for an extra point, you can effectively glide off the top of a building to another area instead of walking down the side of the wall, going across the alley and up the other side. You can effectively just, back glide, whoosh, to the other side, bam, pick off an alien, and then go back to hiding. And so I'm looking at that, and it's really coming more into its own, and I'm kind of digging it.
Okay, yeah.
So that's been taking up a decent amount of time. But the main thing is this one actually isn't just new for this week.
Okay.
I got something to admit. I've been watching a TV series for the last 3 weeks. On Tuesdays, over on the History Network, they have a fake documentary called, Cryptid, like the swamp monster or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And, I decided to give it a try because, hey, apparently, quickly check it out. Oh, it's a far-apart series. Mm-hmm. Done in like a documentary style, but it's all fake. It's dramatized events of things that were kind of like what they happen. It's like that based on a true story thing where they take an idea, very loose as the core of the idea, and string it out from there.
Yeah.
We've all seen that in the movies. Based on, like a true story means very little.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So this sounds fun. Like I have no problem with it's just for fun. It's a piece of fiction that sort of looks like a documentary.
Yeah, and I don't even know if the scientists they have that they come on for a quick little bit and explain something if they're real scientists or if they're fake. I don't know how far it extends into.
Do they put like little cards under with the name?
Yeah, it's like so and so, doctor this of this university. I'm not big on U.S. university. I don't even know if that university really exists.
Okay. Yeah.
For all I know, they just made it up for the purpose of the story. Whichever. But I'm still on the fence as to whether or not I really like it or don't. Because on the one hand, I'm enjoying.
You've been watching it for 3 weeks and you're not sure.
Well, I've watched it for 3 episodes.
3 episodes in the okay.
Well, and I'm okay with the story. The premise of there's a small a town in the Louisiana swamplands. And things are happening, things that are scaring people. And I'm okay with that. And it's like maybe supernatural things, and people going missing, and bodies are being found, and there are beast things and weird sounds in the woods. I can dig all that.
Yeah, sounds cool.
But when I'm watching it, I get the sense that it's like, well, this could have been, it's like a TV series, like something you see like Supernatural or X-Files, or much more conventional, weekly format sort of thing.
Yeah.
but the team that was writing it just couldn't get a proper handle on characterization and writing lines. And so instead of having, like the plot advanced by this person speaks and they speak and then, okay, we'll decide to do this. And it's like, okay, here's a scene, here's the reaction, and then the narrator says, and then they go into the swamp to try and find the missing children who are hunting the Aruguru, which is the name of the monster, which is like kind of like a werewolf type thing.
Yeah.
Maybe, And so it strikes me as like, well, maybe it could have been like a complete series, not just, a 4-parter, but maybe something like a, 13 episode, full season sort of thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
But they couldn't quite get a hold of like the pace and the writing style of like character dialogue and character development arcs. And so they went, you know what, forget this. We're just going to write it as a documentary sort of style, and then bam, it's out there, and it's kind of awesome as it is.
Yeah, well, I will mention, like, something that you see in sort of dramas, like, I think it might be in, like, CSI and the sort of detective dramas or the forensic dramas, they often will shorten sort of, like, that whole thinking process.
If you want to get, like, a genetic sample, from something, it takes an hour as opposed to a couple of weeks, a specified lab that's all the way on the other side of the country.
Exactly.
So labs can do
if you're trying to do it in a sort of a dramatic, like half hour or an hour or 42 minutes or whatever without commercials, if you want to fit it into that format, you do have to do these funky things with time compression. And with a documentary, it's like, well, no, we can sort of
you got 4 hours to tell a whole darn thing.
Well, yeah, and you can skip those sort of dramatic scenes. Well, you can focus drama elsewhere, sort of, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say.
You can just basically skip to the answer. Right?
Yeah.
Like, here's a question, like, we caught somebody, that's, a videotape of sounds out in the woods. What is this? Oh, we take it to the lab. The lab people say, I don't know, but we can put it out and, onto the internet where they've got, like, people that'll wind up doing, like, listen searches, and it's basically open sourcing it, sort of thing, where anyone who wants to can listen, and it comes back. Closest thing it sounds like is like an an ape coming from the the African jungle areas, but that's nothing proper for the area. What could it possibly be? The end for that question. There's your answer.
Question is resolved.
And then it goes on to more other things like they got the main group of people is from Cajun beasts, as in like we capture wild animals. CAGIN beasts, as in to cage a beast.
Right.
It's a play on words with Cajun for
okay.
It's not bad. It's pretty clever.
Okay.
It hasn't gotten old yet for a term, so so it focuses on them as much as anything else.
Yeah.
But
you
they
don't
hear
they
them.
do talk though, right?
Yeah, they do talk. They'll talk to the cameraman.
Okay.
Sort of thing. But it just doesn't seem to have as much dialogue as you would normally expect, sort of thing.
They don't have scenes with each other, sort of dramatic.
Well, they do have scenes where they're talking like it's like, oh, so now we're out, hunting people now, trying to find these lost kids out in the swamplands.
Well, that sounds kind of dramatic.
But that represents approximately 50% of the entire conversation. And the guy's like, the guy responds, well, I just don't want to let them be out there. I mean, they're 2 kids. They don't really know nothing about the swamp, so I'm going to go out and see if we can find them before dark and everyone gets home happy.
Okay.
And so the next scene is, they're in a boat and they're going up into the swamplands trying to figure out where these 2 kids went, trying to hunt for the beast.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it strikes me as a little bit like how Lovecraft wrote. Because when Lovecraft wrote, he never really put in much dialogue either. It was always written like from a past tense, and then this happened, and
mm-hmm.
so-and-so does this, or like, and then I believed it was this at the time, but now I suspect it was indeed much sinister.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? That's a legitimate style. Lovecraft has a lot of fans, and his writing style was not that bad.
Yeah.
So I just don't know how well it translates out onto the screen.
That's true. Yeah, and you know how you get like instructional things like when you work at a place and they're like, okay, say this to the customer, and it sounds really cheesy. Like the thing that you're
boy,
supposed to
does
say.
that ever sound? It sounds so cheesy. It sometimes physically hurts me to think about saying it.
Yeah, and I guess like if you're bad at dialogue, sort of that's what it ends up being for the actors. Of like, are you serious? I'm supposed to say this. So yeah, so you can have that.
Well, that's the thing is, I mean, I'll see the lines of you want me to try and because I remember doing like the Dairy Queen thing way back when I was a young man, as they really tried to upsell you on that. It's like you don't ask for like, do you want that in a small, medium, large for a drink? You say medium, small, or large, because people are more likely to remember the first or the last thing you said, and so by putting small in the middle, they're less likely to choose small, even though it's a very linear, properly option, right?
Yeah.
And so that always struck me as a little weird to even say. But if you put your own spin on it and put that, you can get a lot more people happier and much more reasonable. It's like, we got a bacon sale going on right now, so that's actually being reduced by 50 cents for you. And then you'll wind up having the customer say, well, then I'll have double the bacon on there. And so they wind up paying 50 cents more, but they get double the bacon, and then you've made an extra 50 cents for the boss man.
Yeah.
And so as long as you put it on a decent spin on the whole thing, it's a lot better than the cheesy lines, some sort of advertising group is going to get for you.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, I mean, there's some things I really like about this series, and some things I'm still not certain about. So I'm leaning towards liking it, but there's still that naysaying stuff in the back of my head, like couldn't they have done better? Could they have done something like a little bit more of a traditional format? Because I'd watch 13 episodes of this right now.
Is it also, by any chance, educational about the swamps at all? Like, sort of.
Well, that's the thing, is a lot of what they do for the time as they're like looking for it, they're talking to the cameraman, and it'll be something like. It's like, there's a lot of dangers out here in the swamps that these boys have to be wary of. Everyone thinks about the crocodiles first, but the crocodiles are just the first thing that might be able to get you. There's 100 problems here, and they'll show you, it's like, take a look at that tree over there. That's what we call a widowmaker tree. You can see near the base. It's all rotted down. If you bump into that with your boat, there's a good chance that the whole thing will come right down on top of you, sink you, and kill you right there. And so I find that to be nice. I find that to be like, I don't know if it's true, but how well that's represented is like a widowmaker tree in the Louisiana swamps.
I like it. I'd put that in a D&D game.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely is a nice thing there. And they've got talking about like how you got to be careful where you step, because there's some areas where you'll go sinking right to your knee when you thought it was just a small little puddle sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And
although like actual quicksand doesn't, that's sort of
no, it's just right? It looks like it's
mud.
A small pond,
yeah.
But there's a lot of really loose mud underneath, and you just go sinking in. And then there's all the poisonous creatures around there, so that's where you got to wear the knee-high boots sort of thing, not just for the mud, just to make sure in case a snake tries to bite you, it only gets into the rubber of your boot. And so they explain that as they're walking on through, and that is how they kind of transition from this location to the next. And I actually kind of really like that. That's one of the things where the documentary style pays off. It's like, you could just have them walk and do a nice little scene where they're walking in silence here, from there, and to the other spot. But the whole them explaining to the cameraman, you got to be careful about this here. Even some of the mosses up here are pretty nasty. Like they had one bit where they found the kid's boat, and they haul it was just sitting in the water, and they haul the boat up onto the shore thing, and they figure, this kid's got to be somewhere near here, mate, most likely. And then there's something moving in the boat. What is it? And it's just one of those horrible big rat things they have in the swamp. It looks kind of like a beaver, but without the tail. Just an ugly.
Is it a muskrat or?
It's in the neighborhood of the species of that, like a muskrat and beaver.
A water rat? No, water.
They have a name for it. I don't know if it's a technical name or just like a proper lexicon. It's one of the things they wind up when you're in New Orleans in the middle of the night, you'll hear shots. And it's like, no, it's not a gang. It's actually the pest control people shooting at them, along the dikes from the side of the road.
Yeah.
Because these things are big and nasty, and they're basically giant water rats. And if there's ever anything I want to shoot just out of reflex, just when it's
the poor little rat.
No, trust me, this thing was
so mean.
Well, it's a big thing causing a ruckus in a boat. They have to flip off the tarp. No.
Yeah, it scared them, but it didn't mean them any harm.
Well, that's the thing is in New Orleans they have caused a lot of harm to the systems.
Okay.
They build
spread
up
disease.
Well, they spread disease, and like most creatures of that size and role, they wind up building small dams in areas to house themselves up.
Beaver dams.
So they cause problems with the water system in there.
Right.
But yeah, they have that. So they don't worry, this is the harmless beast. It's the equivalent of the cat that jumps out of nowhere in a horror film.
Right.
One of the other things I really like about it, where the documentary style pays off, is that, as I said, they've got the people looking for the kids. then all of a sudden they find like a tree where it's got like Blair Witch sort of things hanging from it, weird little designs of sticks
Blair
and twigs.
Witch.
Yeah. It's just hanging from that, and some people, like, oh, I see claws up there. It looks like a beast marking its territory, but what creature marks its territory 7 feet off the ground? And so 2 of them want to try and explore around here, thinking the kids were probably going to wind up seeing this, and that's where they're likely to start trying to find the magic, mythical beast. And the other 2 are like, no, this is just something stupid. I want to, go upstream and search proper, do a more thorough search as opposed to, I think they're here. So the cameraman goes with those 2 people as they head on up, and when something happens at the other location and they can't get radio contact with them despite being about only a mile apart, when it should have a radius of about 7 miles, they know something's up. What's up? They don't know. Why don't you, the viewer, know? Well, I mean, a lot of movies have like these, artificial heightening of suspense simply to heighten suspense.
Yeah.
You don't know because they won't let you know. In this case, because there was no cameraman to film what the heck happened there. And so that's where the style pays off, and that's where I'm much more able to respect the non-information. Why don't you know? The cameraman wasn't there. If there was a cameraman there with film or something to film, then they could use it as a found footage sort of thing as to what they found, when they came there, and I guess all the bodies are strewn, killed and strewn apart. Or I don't know. That's on this upcoming episode as to what happened there. But I think that's the format pays off in that regard.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you will see these sort of fake documentaries that will just, for some reason, they'll just have that scene. They'll be like, well, yeah, there's no explanation for there was a camera there or anything like that. They'll just throw it in there and just hope the viewers just sort of forgot. And sometimes you do as a viewer. It's very easy to just
You're into it. You want to know the answers.
Story.
You need to find out more, and so you're willing to accept this break from the style. But in this case, that is one of the things I do like about it. That's weighing me towards whether or not I like this series.
Okay, yeah.
But in the end, I still don't know. I still can't definitively put it in my mind as like, this was a good series. I would like to see that again sometime. Versus, it had its flaws. Like where do I put this on my mental shelf?
Now, can you spoil it and tell me whether they found a monster yet?
No. The 4th part is not up until this upcoming Tuesday.
So you don't know if... so they haven't... In 3 episodes, they haven't found the monster.
Well, they've found some evidence. I mean, there's some stuff rushing through, the old sugarcane fields behind the abandoned factory, but you weren't able to catch a clear view.
Would you feel ripped off if it was just like, escaped monk gorilla from the zoo or something? Or?
No, I'd still dig that. Any sort of definitive answer is pretty good. That said, there's been some interesting things about a family that stays, like far away from even regular society. They only come in for, booze and bullets. And other than that, you don't ever think of stepping on their property. You will get yourself shot. They're that kind of family. Mm-hmm. And so one of them winds up dead, like partially eaten and dead that they find, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the Cajun Beast people start hearing things like the body's no longer in the morgue. And because it's, scared people telling the story, what's going on here, some people are saying that, the family members came and, took the body. Some people are saying that the body got up and walked away. Some people are saying the body just disappeared. And so until they get over to the coroner, it's up in the air as to, what's going on, like what actually happened to the body. Apparently everyone's agreed that the body's no longer there, but as to how it has no longer become a part of the mortuary, until you get to the coroner, it's like, maybe he did just get up and walk away. Maybe he's maybe he was like the werewolf thing, because it wasn't silver that ate him. He just wasn't able to stay dead from it. Got up and walked out in the middle of his autopsy.
So, are the characters in this show, like the investigators or whatever,
the Cajun Beasts capturing crew?
Yeah, the crew. Now, are they sort of speculating on like, maybe it's like ghosts or something, or are they more scientific minded? Are they like, no way it's...
Well, we don't know what it is. I don't think it can't be anything supernatural. And they do have the sheriff there. He is technically much more of a secondary character, despite the fact that he should probably be the one, to focus. Because he's got to deal with all the crud going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, each one takes their own sort of thing. Like, I don't know. All I know is what I've been able to see, versus the one guy, he believes sort of thing, a member, and he's one of the ones that stays behind at the tree. And so now, he's out of radio contact. Don't know what happens to him yet. Versus the one guy who, I don't care if it's supernatural or not. I just want to make sure I can get these kids out of the swamp safe. I just want to be able to do my dang job regularly. I don't want to have to deal about Cajun supernatural things. I don't care about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it depends on, too, like how big the town is, whether the sheriff...
It's got a rural style to it, very much so.
Yeah, because sometimes sheriffs, I mean, they have other jobs to do, so you can't follow him around all day.
No. But that's the thing is, ever since this sort of thing happened, he's been very busy.
But, the other thing is, like, sometimes other shows will... It'd be interesting to see, like, a crossover sort of with, a cop-style show where it's like, here's his dash cam and here's what he's doing for cops, and sort of, like, have it intersect with he's doing some other routine, stuff in the county or whatever, pulling over, giving people speeding tickets, or I don't know what else he does, and sort of like intersect that a little bit. I don't know if that's...
Well, the thing is, they only got 4 hours to tell the full story.
Yeah, that'd be extra fluff, I guess.
If they were to make it for the 13 episodes sort of style, though, they could totally have the time for that. But, c'est la vie, they made their choice.
So you've watched 3, and there's only gonna be 4?
Apparently, yes.
Okay.
I don't know if the ratings get good and they get enough people saying maybe they'll have a sequel series about the whole thing. I got to see how the 4th part ends.
I guess, yeah, we'll see. We'll find out how it ends. I may have to look it up somewhere. It might be on iTunes or somewhere else.
Maybe they're showing it up over on the History Network channel online.
Yeah, I'll check the online channel too. Yeah.
Because I find it very interesting. So I'm watching it, I'm thinking this, like I've said, this has a nice sort of documentary feel to it. But why did they choose that format style for it? I think it could have worked as a full series, maybe 2 seasons worth out of that they could have gotten. But apparently 4 hours worth of film is all they were able to get funding for. So maybe there was budgetary constraints. Maybe they couldn't properly write the dog. They couldn't figure out what sort of personality the people had until, it's like, okay, we'll just do it this style. Quick, done. Yeah.
Well, I'm fond of my theory of that, the fact that when you dramatize it, you have to sort of compromise certain story elements like trips to the lab and stuff like that it just doesn't work that way.
And I'm okay with that sort of thing. I mean, Stephen King wrote a werewolf novel back in, was it 1980? And it was a bunch of short stories sort of thing all connecting up. And, the werewolf, when he transformed, was very, very badly timed. If you were to look at it, like, on Halloween, on the 4th of July, Easter, that sort of thing. And there was no way the full moon was falling on each of those dang dates for the purpose of, like, a full year. Mm-hmm. And so he took some severe creative liberties as to when the full moon happens. But you know what? That's forgivable because it's just, to highlight a thing like that. It's not meant to be that hard of a style. And I think a lot of people are willing to forgive that, especially if it's like, the lab came back with this answer. Because,
yeah.
A lot of people are willing to, when CSI was fresh and new, we're able to say, it only takes 45 minutes to get a genetic analysis. Right, yeah. It's like, dude, it's only an hour-long episode, and they got to solve the whole thing until then. Just skip ahead a little bit. No one's going to fault you. No one faulted House when they were able to do only so many tests in this amount of time, when that was a lot more than you can actually fit in there. It's just to help, speed along the creative process. It's like the non-Conan people in a Conan story. Their only real purpose is to help get Conan from this scene to that scene, and if they die in the meantime, so be it. So it's just creative liberty, which I think should be allowable for almost any genre within reason.
I have no problem with it. But if you wanted to sort of make your show different and say like, oh no, our show is ultra realistic, then that's one thing that you could add to the mix to say, look how real we're being, and look how much we're paying attention to details, and people respond to that. So,
well, here's the thing with stuff like CSI is you can't progress the plot, the story, and discover who did what and who is potentially in and out for the list of suspects until that thing comes back from the lab. Yeah. If they were to work it more of like, if you could, with a nice amount of time and some editing, you could take like an entire season of the CSI and put all the stuff together. And so you could have like, let's see, they did how many was it, like 20 episodes a season? You could have 20 cases going on all at once, interspersed, as it goes back and forth, and then it would take the amount of time, but it would take a lot more concentration power for the audience.
I suppose, yeah.
So, it's to help things along for the audience as much as it is to speed along the plot, I believe.
Yeah.
Or, if you want, you could wind up seeing it as an analogy to magic. And this is going to seg us into our main topic for the day.
Right.
How much do you know about PCR replication? Probably not a lot.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
It takes time. It's made some wonderful progress in the last 20 years. Like, I remember reading, in the popular sciences stuff back when I was in grade school, saying like, oh, they've been able to find, like polymerase stuff that trims DNA to a certain size, and it only takes them like a week to get that done. They thought it was previously impossible. Now it actually will only take you a few hours, and then you can go on to the next step.
Okay.
They've gotten very efficient at that.
Yeah, so it's gotten better.
But you really need to know what's going on to figure out how is it trimming the DNA down to these sizes.
Yeah, so for all intents and purposes, it might as well be magic.
You just don't know. It's a big, nice question mark for you, and then, it's like, okay, but you don't need to know that because here's the answer. And so it winds up effectively, mimicking, I suppose, in an alternate genre format, someone casts the magic spell of who done it, and it's like, a redhead done it. And then all of a sudden, like anyone who's not a redhead is no longer a suspect in this arcane criminal investigation thing, which now that I said it out loud, I would kind of like to see for like maybe a novel or two. A pseudo-medieval style where you have like forensic magicians.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, and that segues into the main topic for this week is replacing magic with technology.
Yes, in your D&D setting, your role-playing setting.
Well, I mean, you can look at it from more major for styles. On the one hand, you can have a fantasy sort of thing where, oh no, so and so the knight, the main protagonist, the knight has lost his sword arm. So that's okay.
Oh, the whole arm.
Well, yeah, there's a pretty nasty thing. You should see the dragon he fought, though. That thing's dead. But he lost his arm in the fight. And so, what happens to him? Well, don't worry. They've managed to find, like a master dwarven, smith who's, when he smiths something, it takes on additional properties. Like his swords are the best swords ever. But if he was to smith, an arm, it would actually be able to move and act like a real arm. Because that's the power of dwarven, smith magic. And so he winds up, getting, a silver arm bolted onto him, and then he's, protagonist knight, with the silver arm, and there you go. That actually happens in fiction. I've seen that in the fantasy stuff. It's like, oh yes, now that's how he gets known. He's the guy with the silver arm. Is that any different from a cybernetic prosthetic? Like after Luke gets his hand chopped off? Spoiler alert, sorry, that was about 3.5 decades ago, at least. 4.5 decades ago, wow. Time's flying by.
They do tend to have slightly different power sets, like slightly different rules.
Slightly different, but in the long run, you can see them as being clear analogs for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it winds up being like, there's a lot of parallels between sci-fi and fantasy. Is a wizard shooting, like from his wand, like a ray of death? Is that any different from, an evil mook shooting off a ray gun at you?
Well, the thing is, I sort of would hope so. I mean, I know functionally in a lot of cases it's sort of the same. Like, especially in a role-playing game, you roll a die, and you sort of roll the same d20 for the blaster as for the wand of magic. Well, no, you don't.
The wand of put a hole in your body.
For, like, a magic wand that shoots rays or a gun that shoots rays, you roll the same die, and so as far as role-playing games go, they're often the same. But I like to I sort of want worlds to feel different. Like I want it to be a different.
You want them to have the different aesthetic texture.
Yeah.
And yet, by and large, you could effectively take a scene like you could take like a Frank Frazetta scene of like a fighter doing all this and that. You can retool that as a cyberpunk sort of thing. And it wouldn't look out of place for a style. I'm afraid that's how it goes in a lot of situations, because of what qualifies as the unknown. Do you know how the blaster gun works for the mook shooting at you with his photon rays? Probably not. The technology doesn't actually exist. Mm-hmm. So you just have to make up. You push the trigger and out comes a ray of death. So don't get in that way of the ray.
Well, I have seen schematics of sort of, the Star Wars blaster that fans have done up and sort of said, like, this is probably how it works, and here's a charge holding section, and here's like a power source, and here's this is the handle. Obviously, it has to have a handle. Whereas wands sometimes might not have a handle. Like, for some reason, wands don't have a trigger.
Here's the fun bit. If you go to stuff like Girl Genius, they wind up intermingling the two sort of things. I remember a short story they told. It was basically a variation of Cinderella. And the fairy godmother's having a hard time making the wand work. And so, like the Cinderella girl, she winds up, using the power of science to fix it. Like, your stones were misaligned, and your pentagram grid was completely off center. You had to redraw all the lines on there. And so she winds up like supercharging the wand, and it does have like a trigger on it after the end. And so you take the whole thing of like why was the wand not working right? Well, her crystal alignment was horrible. She had to completely realign the crystals, redraw all the pentagrams, and the Eye of Newt she was using inside the wand was completely rotten away. She needed new Eye of Newt. That sounds kind of weird, in a magic sort of way, but that does make a certain, sort of sense. Like, it sounds kind of like a magic thing. You got to use the right crystal, get the right crystal energy powers. Mm-hmm. Is that much different than saying, well, your isotronic lineators were not linear, so I had to re-alineate them. In which case, I suppose what they called it, the technobabble, when they had to wind up coming with the stuff in Star Trek, right?
Yeah.
So, and then Geordie LaForge says, and they put basically technobabble here, and they'd have a sub crew of writers that would just come up with the technobabble needed for why you can't do that with the warp core in this particular instance. Mm-hmm. Whatever. It's a reasoning. Why can the magician not do that? Well, I recall explicitly a nice example for that in the Venture Brothers. Their Christmas episode, the boys accidentally summoned the Krampus, which is kind of like the anti-Santa. He takes, naughty boys and girls and he whips them. Just mercilessly, because, European. That's what happens. And, the scientist says to the magician, can't you science this thing? Can't you magic this thing away? And the magician replies, well, can't you science it away? And in that series, they're very much two sides of the same sort of coin. So as to who can do what.
Yeah, it's narrative-wise, sure.
Yeah, and so it's not just a simple thing of like a magician just doesn't wave their hand in a certain way and all of a sudden reality changes however they so want it. You have to work at it. Otherwise, just like magician, moves a hand, end of story, you got 12 more minutes of time to fill. Sorry. So in a lot of cases when you do have magic in the story, the magic you can't just have, and then they use the crystal ball to contact the wizard. Hey, wizard, can you do this? It's going to save the world from blowing up. Wizard snaps his fingers. World does not blow up. The end. That doesn't make for good storytelling. The wizard will have to say, I could do that, but we're going to need some very rare components to get this sort of thing. And so you're going to have to go to like the Mountains of Doom, followed by the Pit of Despair, and after that, the floating elven castle high in the sky.
Okay, so the wizard sort of, he has that power.
He has the power with the right, tools to make his thing work. Whereas we'll work with cyberpunk. People find out evil bad guy's going to wind up taking over. They didn't really have the internet as a term back for most cyberpunk, but we'll say the internet. Bad guy's going to take over the internet.
Okay.
So they talk to the master hacker. The master hacker says, I think I can be able to put in a couple counter programs and make my way and stop him what he's doing, but I'm going to need some pretty powerful components to make this work. My current computer is just not able to handle this task. I'm going to need some pretty high-end stuff. You're going to have to break into the labs for this. I'm going to need a real good, like a Pentium processor, like ultimate Pentium processor chip. So you're going to have to break into the labs to steal their prototype there. Then I'm going to need, this sort of stuff here. And then I'm going to need some proper ISP access. So I'm going to need you to physically get into the local ISP guy. And we're going to need you to put some extra router stuff going on in here so we can take over it at the proper time so they can't. And so it really becomes very close to the same thing. Why? Because not a lot of people know exactly how it goes. Router, that sounds like something from the internet. Yes, you need to realign your routers on here.
You definitely need a router to get on the internet. That's true.
Well, depending on who you talk to, for some of those early to mid 90s sci-fi movies, you didn't even need that. They just like, oh, you can access it with the power of your mind because the internet's everywhere. It's going through us right now with wireless signals, man.
Oh. Well, it might be. It might end up being that way, I guess, in the future. I mean, it sort of is. I mean, we have our Wi-Fi, but that that has to be connected to some anchor in the real world. And
a lot of people have problems understanding that. Like, occasionally you'll see like somebody saying, "Oh yeah, I'm part of that was it Dial-A-Geek service," and I went to a spot and the guy had he connected his wireless modem sort of thing, and he had like a wired connection up there, and he just had the line going out to the main room. It wasn't attached to anything. It was just like the end of like your standard, wired connection, and he just had that taped to the wall because he thought it gave him better reception with his wireless router. And it's like, why? Because they just didn't know enough about technology. For them, it acts like a sort of magic, like, oh yeah, this is a line, this is where the internet goes to, this is like the pipe that the internet is like. And so if I put it out to here, then when I'm using my computer, it'll flow closer because that's where the internet is right there, right? And so they just don't understand enough.
Yeah, did you ever have the old kind of TV with like an actual antenna?
Oh, yes.
I think my parents had one when I was very little.
Yeah, I remember with the whole bunny ears up there, and we were in a mountainous sort of area, and so we wound up having to get like aluminum foil wrapped around them, and sometimes you'd have to move them to adjust. Like, okay, we get good reception here. Can it hold right there? Good. Okay, now we got it without so much snow on there.
Yeah.
But as to exactly what was causing that snow, it was like, I don't know, it's just bad reception. It took us years, until we got the internet and look up, like, what the heck is causing all the snow on the old TVs, that sometimes, in stuff like mountainous areas, you don't have a good natural thing anyways, and you're actually relying on a little bit of atmospheric bounce. And so it could be that, no, it's too sunny a day, there's not the atmosphere you want to properly bounce it off. And you can see this right now with the AM radio stations. If you got, anything that captures radio waves, and you go on the AM stuff, at the right time of night, you can actually get stuff from China, and it'll bounce off of the atmosphere, and it'll come over to us. And so you won't be able to get it for all night long. It'll wind up zoning in and then out because of how the atmosphere changes throughout the course of the night.
Okay.
But it's a really good example. But if you don't know that, it's like, yes, only in the depths of the night can you find the radio stations that were hidden during the day.
Well, I kind of like that thought. That's a useful plot element.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good number of stories you can find about, like, the radio station that only exists in the shadow of night and when you're alone. Because, I mean, heck, that's when I first heard the coast-to-coast AM stuff. It's like, I am not tired. Yeah. It is midnight. It's Saturday. Let's see what I can get on the radio station. I'm like, and I'm slowly moving the thing, and I'm listening to it. And then it's people talking about weird things, about aliens, and, and about mysterious holes that go into the center of the Earth, and other weird stuff like that. It's also where I first heard, like, the X-1, like, there'd be something on at midnight out of... I don't even know where the heck it was. I can barely even remember the station, but it was somewhere from, like... I think far off in the U.S. that I couldn't get during the day, but at midnight, if I could tune it just right, I could hear the old radio broadcasts from before TV existed, and it would be like X-1, and it would tell wonderful stories. It was basically like the Twilight Zone sort of stuff. Weird stories, scary stories, sci-fi stories.
Huh.
And so, yeah, and I mean, if that's in my mind right now, and that's believable, I'm willing to believe a lot of weird stuff in stations you can only catch in the depths of the night. Why? Because they are not, something that meshes well with the sunlight of the day and has nothing to actually do with bouncing off of the
it could just be, arcane energies or... Yeah.
These are things that are blasphemous. These are like dark occult things that shun the day, even though they're only radio waves.
All right.
Yeah, and so... If I didn't know much more about like what was actually happening and the radio waves bouncing off of the atmospheric layers that develop during the night, it would just be like the weird stations that only come in.
Yeah.
In which case, I suppose that's an interesting example of ignorance is bliss, because I had a lot of fun finding those radio stations. Now, I was just like, yeah, I know exactly what's going on, and whatever.
Okay, so here's my question for you. Okay, so given, if I agree with you that sort of magic and technology might as well be interchangeable,
when done on a thematic scale,
okay,
sort of thing.
Well, how do you decide then between which one? Is it just like I just feel like magic-y today for this story, or is there no, like, literally no difference? Like you can tell the exact same story with.
Well, I think it goes back down to an aesthetic
magic.
texture sort of thing. If you want this to take place in the future, magic isn't going to really work well unless you're in a Shadowrun sort of thing where magic comes back and things change that way.
So magic is in the past, science is in the future.
That's generally how a lot of people perceive it. Mind you, that's not hard and fast. There are a lot of people that keep saying, oh yes, the ancient people of Atlantis had technology that far outstrips ours of today.
Yeah.
And so you can have technology in the past, so you can always have magic in the future.
Well,
those are subversions almost.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Jack Vance and his Dying Earth series, and the Jack Vance novels. It's set far in the future with a dying Earth, and that there are... Basically, there's magicians who cast magic spells, and they're like, oh, I have this so much... This is where Vancian magic comes from. And I can expel so much... I can prepare this spell in the morning, but then it leaves my brain. But sort of the idea behind it is that there's supposed to be some technology, it might be wireless, or it might be just nanobots. Something was left behind by the previous civilizations.
An entire cloak of geosynchronous satellites always watching for the proper hand motions to be done in order to effectively type your program into the coding.
Yeah, so
all that's
becomes
missing is a proper visual screen for it, like with the Stark technology, where you've got like the 3D thing that you can interact with.
Yeah, like from Iron Man, yeah.
Yeah.
So that becomes sort of magic, and then sort of underneath that whole magical world, there's another scientific world, which is kind of cool. It's nifty in that.
Yes, the Might and Magic series wound up going in a similar route. It always seemed like you're in this almost stereotypical fantasy setting, and then it's only towards the end of the game that you realize, no, what you're on is actually like a giant space station sort of thing. Magic actually does exist. But it's not, like a medieval world. What you're in is a world that has descended after, the collapse of the civilization, and that's why there are all these weird monsters. They were used to be doing some genetic experiments, but they got loose. Whoops.
Yeah.
And now you have to suffer for it. Swing a sword there, buddy. And so yeah, the melding, when done right, can help take you out and make you realize you're part of something bigger, especially when you combine the two together.
Well, and you want to be careful, well, in a role-playing game, because you have characters who, like, I am a mighty wizard, and then sort of, like, if you're manipulating their power, you're like, oh, well, everything you thought you knew, and it can be a little, well, if you do it right, it's fine, because it's like, oh, wow, there's a whole other world to discover, but if you do it wrong, it's like, well, I had a knowledge 20 arcana, shouldn't I have had some inclination? Like, but I don't know, maybe not.
Well, that's why you should make the decision at the start, sort of thing. It's like, not even people that use it and know it very well will be able to properly understand because they don't have the right mindset, versus they know the terrible secret behind magic. It's all a lie. But they will never say it out loud.
Yeah. Because
then, their fellow brethren will denounce them as heretics, and, you know what? You can still burn at the stake even if you know magic. Funny thing, that.
Yeah. Well, and, I mean, like so many other implausible things in stories, conspiracies are implausible, because once a few people, like if, hundreds of magicians know, or, hundreds of wizards exist in the world and know the secret of magic, how is nobody blabbing? Because
they're the ones that have the power, and if they upset that, they run the risk of losing the power.
Yeah, but don't they have to have assistants, or, it's just... They have to
and
get
that's
along
why
in the
that's
world.
why they cloak everything in the style of like the arcane, and you have to do this first and prepare it like this way. It's a distraction technique. That's the ultimate real magic, is you do something with your left hand when you're doing the real thing with your right.
So the wizard's conspiracy.
Well, I mean, honestly, is it really any that different from, spoiler alert, Santa Claus? A lot of people know he doesn't exist, and yet we're still able to maintain the illusion in front of a lot of children.
Well, children are fairly easy to fool.
And so is the stereotypical medieval peasant.
Yeah, and if we're talking about stories, people like are willing to suspend their disbelief anyway, so I guess it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
But then why do we even bother trying to make things look plausible in our stories?
It's better for the audience to have at least a semblance of an explanation rather than none at all. If they, don't get any explanation for why this works like this, then they feel unfulfilled. It feels like, oh yeah, and then, it's basically, like a cardboard cutout sort of thing. Having at least a plausible excuse makes things seem a little bit more real.
Yeah.
Like how does the blaster pack in the Star Wars have so many 100 shots? Well, it's actually a small cold fusion generator. What you have to do is actually put some water in the back every once in a while, and that winds up getting used up, and it releases oxygen and hydrogen on its own as an ambient leak, and that's why you do have to actually fill it up every once in a while.
And that's why it smells like ozone.
Exactly, we'll say. Is that true? I don't know, but you know what? That sounded kind of plausible, didn't it?
I guess so. I don't even know. And
all you
other
need
problem,
is the broad strokes.
Well, yeah.
This is not like an intricate painting you need to do. It's all the broad strokes that somebody needs to put in the color to the system.
I guess you just have to make it plausible for your person who doesn't know too much. Because I'd imagine sort of a physicist might have a better idea of if a blaster is emitting that much energy, how does it release its heat? It has to fire so much energy that direction, so there has to be an equal and opposite force in the other direction. So where does that go into heat? And it has a radiator or something?
Well, that's the thing, is it's got a monopolar heat sink that actually winds up recharging the battery as it fires. That's why it has so many shots per use. If they didn't have the heat sinks in, they'd have to have some high temperature withstanding materials, which would really drive up the cost, and you'd run the risk of only being able to get about a half dozen shots out before you needed it to either cool down or you wind up warping the barrel of the system, and then you run the risk of catastrophic failure.
Well, that's good enough for me, I suppose.
There you go. All you need is a little technobabble to make it work. Magic has the nice thing of just saying that, it's weird, arcane things that mankind was not meant to understand. Yeah. Sometimes you have to picture 6-dimensional figures in your mind to make it work. And then people go, whoa. 6 dimensions? That's too much for me. I'll just buy that. That's good enough excuse.
Mm-hmm.
I have Newton. Yeah, that sounds like something a wizard would use. Yeah, that's why they need the ingredient. Good enough. So magic is a bit more of an easy route because, why? It's magic. It requires very little explanation. If it had an explanation proper, it wouldn't be magic. That's like the whole line about alternative medicine. What do you call alternative medicine that's been proven to work? Medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what do you call magic that's been proven for a system through trial and error? Well, theory.
Theory or science.
Science.
Yeah.
And so it winds up
just different forces of nature that.
It winds up becoming mundane. It's no longer magic.
Okay.
Even if it's fairly rare. But a little technobabble is all that most people really ever want. Some settings get a lot of praise for going the extra length. I remember the Command and Conquer stuff. They had their whole Tiberium, and they hired some scientists to come in and write, what is this Tiberium stuff from outer space, and what sort of properties does it have, and what are the logistic implications thereof. And they wound up writing pseudo-scientific papers on the whole fictional mineral for it, and that got praise within both the gaming community as well as the more outsider stuff. Was they're actually trying to make it a much more internally consistent thing.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. You get the polite golf clap for taking the extra stride and making it seem much more plausible. Thank you. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Especially because some scientists managed to get a little extra work and a little extra cash for that, and I'm all for that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Just running out of time on the podcast.
But let me make this clear here. Although I have called it, the easy route, magic doesn't necessarily need to be the easy route. You could have an internal system of magic very well developed as to what you can and can't do. I think the Harry Potter series did some stuff very well, by and large, as to what you can and cannot do with magic. I'm sure there's probably dozens upon dozens of various good anime series that had their own internal system of what you can do and you can't do with magic. That said, science doesn't always necessarily need to be the hard route. I've seen more than enough stuff where they ignore so many rules of physics and computing possibilities and all this, where magic, is the hard stuff, and science is the soft technology. No one bothers to even come up with an explanation. So, but in large, it's like if you want to write the story main first, sort of thing, magic is the easier way to go. If you want to come up with the concept of why and what are the implications that spring out from this naturally, technology seems to be the better route for you.
Okay, so technology is just slightly more sort of detailed and gritty.
Well, I mean, how did Clark say it? Any technology, if sufficiently advanced, appears identical to magic.
Close enough.
They really are the left and right hand of something greater. As to what that something greater is, well, I'll let you decide for that yourself. It might be, mankind's understanding of the universe.
Oh yeah, the imagination or something.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah.
Well, that's technically up to anyone who wants to write it for what they want to see as to how they're connected, but they are very, very similar. But just so long as each one has that thin veneer of reasoning underneath a whole lot of question marks, like I don't know how it works, then either one is technically good, and that's where they both stem from for why is this happening and what's giving the impetus for the characters.
Okay, well, I will basically agree with you. I think generally that's enough, but I'm always looking out for the next story that takes it another level, that takes it that gives you a little bit more plausible, a little bit deeper scientific explanation of whatever's happening. Science fiction.
In that case, may I recommend the Ghost in the Shell series?
Okay. Yeah.
They were. It's hard to call it hard science because a lot of stuff doesn't exist. But they were very internally consistent with what you could do, what you can't do, and what we don't know you can do.
Okay.
And so that one wound up being nice. A little gory, sometimes some nudity, but very good characterization, and that is ultimately what I believe it should ultimately about. It should not be about the magic. It should not be about the technology, not main-wise. That should always be the second place. It should always be about the characters, how this stuff affects them, how they respond to it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think it's it will be sort of in most stories because humans are telling them for other humans to consume. So yeah.
Although one day when we do get an artificial intelligence up and running, I would like to see what it winds up writing for its fiction. Mm-hmm. I would really love to see that, and I will possibly be, at the nearest bookstore, ready to buy a fresh copy of that book day one.
Yeah, and
even though it is an antiquated format still, whatever.
And I will say, my appetite for hard science fiction isn't that great either, because I guess if I get too much, then that's I can't handle it. It's I fall asleep, or I can't absorb it all, or I need to read up somewhere else.
You start going more towards a niche audience the more detailed you get when it comes to technology and magic sometimes.
Yeah, so I guess what I want is something somewhere in between, at least something that gives you some new element that goes a little deeper, or that other works have not examined before, some little piece that. Well,
that's why I remember in the early 90s they had a lot of fun with doing the reverse, switching technology and replacing it with magic, and coming up with a society of okay, magic exists the same way technology does. How does that affect how we interpret the world, with its various analogs and stuff going out from there? I think it wound up becoming a little bit of an old hat in the sci-fi fantasy stuff, but if you have an interesting way to think about it and take it up, it's still very open and very well received by a lot of people.
What work is this?
All sorts of stuff in the 90s.
All sorts of stuff, okay.
Just involving the juxtaposition of technology with the supernatural. So a deal is made between a lady and Satan, and all of a sudden devils come into the real world, but not as, I'm going to destroy everything. They have to go out and get a real job, too. They need to pay the rent. They need to find, food for themselves. They need to go to work in the same cubicle as everyone else. And if you thought hell was bad, you have not seen middle, business America.
Oh, what show was this?
That was not a show. It was like a book. I remember seeing
it was a book?
Local bookstore.
Okay.
I'm afraid I never picked it up. I was very limited for money when I was young, and so I went with
You only read the back of the book then?
Yeah, it sounded very nice.
Okay. No, that's cool.
I went with the Dragonlance novels instead. I don't regret my choice. They were good novels there.
All right.
I wish I had more money so I could have read everything, though. That's the downside to having a small library in your home small town.
Yeah. So, listeners,
yes.
If you were listening to the show and you had cool thoughts and ideas,
we
want to hear them.
If you have an idea for like a really good setting that does combine magic, and science in a very elegant format, I'd love to hear about that. I'd like to get something added to my list of books to read.
Yes, we wish to feed off of your thoughts and brains.
Or TV programs to watch. I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be literary.
Give us your brains. So yes, via email, thesimulationist@gmail.com.
That's all one word, no underscores?
Yeah, all one word. And you can Twitter at me. You can tweet at me on my Twitter. I am at Spaceboot1. That's Spaceboot numeral 1, and you'll find my name on there, Josh Levin. That's who I am. And we have a YouTube channel. You can leave comments on the YouTube channel.
You guys totally ignored this setting, which was such a good one here, and there's got 15 episodes on this thing for as an aside, just on this. Yeah, I actually do want to know about that.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't sound like that.
You can't out-nerd us on this. I am very interested in it.
Okay.
Try your best. I'll still be intrigued.
Cool.
But it does have to be in English. If you're actually writing it in something else, I'm afraid I'm not good with other languages. And Bing is a horrible translator. So please, in English if you can.
Well, it's getting better all the time.
It's improving, but it's still not where I'd like to see it at.
If you got this off of iTunes, leave us a nice little review, please. Any number of stars, doesn't have to be 5. Can be as many as you think. Yeah.
Well, it does have to be somewhere between 1 and 5. I mean, you're not allowed to give 6 out of 5, are you?
No, I'm not sure if you can. You might be able to leave a review without clicking the stars, but I'm not sure. I'll have to check on that.
That defaults out to just it doesn't weigh one way or another when they're winding up for our score, though, I think.
I guess, yeah.
No, I guess we'll look into it.
Yeah. Let's see. Any other? Let's see. How else can they contact? I think that's everything.
Okay. Here's a quick story idea to part with you guys.
All right.
Everyone says, the next generation of kids, they're always so much more, adept with the technology than our current stuff. Like, they're doing stuff I don't even know how to do on my own technology. Like, they're doing stuff on my iPad. I don't even know what they're doing there. Switch that over with
children?
Switch that over with magic. The next generation of children is always so much more better at magic. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you wind up with a situation of people that are really young and out of control because they've got the real power.
And you can have a magic school.
Yeah, if you want, you can have the magic school, but the teachers won't know as much as the students. They'll have to wind up seeing what they did, and then just doing a little distraction like the old school magic, like over here, and then the kids are looking over there, and then the teachers are learning what the heck the kids did there. So I think you could wind up having a decent story, and there's your concept for a short story this week. If you want to go with that, do that. Send it up to us. Let us know.
Let's see. Well, yes, I have been Josh Levin this whole time.
I've been Ryan Kirkby, I think, except for a brief part in the middle, but I won't tell you when. I wasn't Ryan.
So tune in again next week. There will be another podcast. If you're listening in the future, you can just click on over to the next one, or click back a few if you've missed any, and just sit back and enjoy listening to more of us in the next The Simulationist.
Same pod time, same pod channel.
I was trying so hard not to do that. Everybody does that. But anyways.
I failed. I voluntarily failed. I don't regret it.
Send money.